good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Steve Osborn, who's the managing partner for the SF office of Mintz Levin. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate it.
I feel like it's taken me about a year to get you on, so I'm glad you finally relented and agreed to do this.
Well, first of all, I'm very grateful for the invitation, but it's been a busy year taking over the office and launching a new strategic growth plan. So thanks for being patient.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
Well, let me start by asking you, because you've got a very interesting background. Let me start by asking you why you went to law school in the first place.
Well, I decided to go to law school when I was 8 years old. Well, let's be more clear. I had two paths I was pursuing.
Okay.
One was law school, and I don't know where that exactly came from. Maybe watching LA Law with my parents or something like that. I got interested in that. It felt like a respectable profession. That was important to me. The other one was if I could pull the Slurpee machine at 7-Eleven. That was the two things at 8 years old that I was really focused on. The Slurpee thing didn't work out, so I became a lawyer, and here we are, you know?
Well, what did you when you got to law school? I mean, it sounds like that was your childhood dream. Was it everything you loved? Did you like it right away, or what did you think?
No, I was not a lover of law school, you know.
Oh, interesting.
I went to a great law school. I went to Georgetown.
Yeah.
And, you know, I picked Georgetown among a number of schools, in part because I was very familiar with Washington, D.C., and I was into politics and interested in that area. So I thought it would be a great place to go to school. You know, but the part of law school that was very theoretical was hard for me to get my head around. I was sort of more interested in what was going on practically. We had all sorts of interesting things going on actually in DC at that time, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the Microsoft antitrust trial. So we had all these things going on in the world that I was, to be fair, more interested in than maybe some of the theoretical, you know, peerless or, you know, whatever, you know, law school cases. So I had to teach myself two things. One, you know, a different way of studying and different way of focus. But also, you know, where can you compete in life, you know? And in many ways, I competed on building relationships and on understanding the clients and business and making sure I knew what was going on more than maybe the clients or my colleagues were. And that ended up with a really great offer to join Brobeck, Flager, and Harrison in San Francisco, right as the .com was crashing. So a fateful choice, but nonetheless, you know, I think it shows that you know, sometimes you have to roll with it a little bit. And while I was in the top 20%, I certainly wasn't in the top 5% of my legal class, and yet I still ended up with one of the prime jobs coming out of school. And part of that was just outworking people, but also, you know, focusing on sort of what really matters in life, which is building relationships, you know?
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, what point did you decide you weren't going to be a transactional lawyer? Did you ever flirt with being a litigator? Did you do any litigation as a summer clerk or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, my first summer I spent at a litigation firm, and I have to be honest with you, I wasn't super into it. And you know, I learned later sort of about myself that I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad's an entrepreneur, my wife's an entrepreneur, my brothers are both entrepreneurs, my wife's parents are entrepreneurs. I mean, everyone around me is an entrepreneur. But even coming up and growing up, I really had this super interest in building things and in business. And you know, in many ways, I found litigation to be very challenging because there's a lot of tearing things down. So I was very specific about wanting to join a transactional practice, and that's one of the things Brobeck was offering. You know, was guaranteed sort of into the transactional practice. I also followed somebody in particular, like there was a mentor of mine, Shane Byrne, who was at Brobeck there, and was somebody I was very interested in working with. So that was Brobeck was important because of Shane too. But when I got to Brobeck on my very first day, they went around the room, all of us introduced ourselves, and I introduced myself as a corporate lawyer.
Yeah.
And they came over to me at lunch and they said, oops, we forgot to tell you, you're going to be a litigator, and here are two litigators to take you to lunch. So during lunch, I said, hey, so if I keep this litigation thing going, I can keep my job? And they said, yeah. And I go, okay, I'm in. I'll do it, you know? So I spent 2 years in litigation working for Brock Gowdy, you know, famous litigator in the Bay Area. And working on some really cool stuff. My first trial that I got to be involved in was for the sports agent Lee Steinberg. The second one was a bet the business case for Cisco. It was kind of an exciting Wild West time. And of course, during that time, you know, Brobeck was struggling a little bit financially, and we were laying off a lot of corporate associates. So I felt pretty good about my choice there in the end. And I, you know, Shane and I stayed in touch. And when Brobeck fell down, Shane went over to Baker McKenzie, and I ended up joining him at Baker McKenzie shortly after that to join the transactional side. I'm better for it. I'm a much better transactional lawyer, more interested in the transactional side. But I came over with a lot of great analytical skills, great writing skills. I still use the great writing skills that I learned being a litigator. So grateful for that experience. Nothing like working for Brock Gowdy. That was a tough, environment in a good way. Like, they were very tough on you. I learned a lot. There wasn't a lot of days off. It was all that stuff that you do when you're a young lawyer that have made me successful.
Yeah. So when you finally got to be a transactional lawyer, was it like a duck to water and you just felt like right at home, like it just jumped right into it? Or
I do remember I'm in there about like 10 days. And there's all this nomenclature,
Yeah, right.
So I worked with this amazing lawyer named Neil Patel. He was sort of an associate a couple years above me. Had since left the law and gone into Google, and now is an entrepreneur himself. Really a wonderful human. But I remember him taking me to lunch, and I asked a question like, "What is fully diluted capitalization?" And we were walking to lunch, and I remember he stopped in the middle of California Street, and then he paused and kept walking. And I said, "Was that a stupid question?" And he said, "Yeah, that's a stupid question. That's the core of everything we do." So I wouldn't say I took to it immediately. It took me a little bit of a learning curve there, but look, it was the right place for me. Being around business, learning business, all of those things were huge for me. Shane created some great opportunities. Baker McKenzie, obviously a very large firm, international footprint. He created an opportunity for me to move to Hong Kong and practice in Hong Kong. And then later the firm, selected me to solve a problem in the London office. And in Hong Kong and London, I was on these like capital markets teams, US capital markets teams, taking companies public in the emerging markets. And boy, that was an interesting experience because in many ways, those companies going public in the emerging markets weren't that different than the Silicon Valley tech companies operationally. They just had a lot more opportunity, right? Because of where they were, what the circumstances were. So it was very interesting to work with companies and try to build a prospectus or build that story when you had operational, challenges. And so a lot of ways that job became less about the law and more about working with the CEO and the bankers to sort of take all the clothes off and put them all back on in a way that made sense. And I got really into, at that time, understanding, all these different kinds of businesses we were taking public, from, property company in, Kiev to, biotech in Greece to all sorts of insurance company in Egypt. I mean, really interesting stuff. Palm oil in Indonesia. If you don't do a palm oil deal in Southeast Asia, you haven't done deals in Southeast Asia. So, that's an important stepping stone in that practice. But anyways, I learned a lot out of that about, how these businesses are constructed financially, how things move. It was a great experience. So in terms of like taking to it, that's where I think accelerated my career and interest in business, and it ultimately led me to want to take a chance. I was just
going to ask you, because I was going to say at some point it looks like you made the transition to go in house. Tell me a little bit how that came about and what attracted you to doing that.
Yeah, the first thing you should know is in terms of priorities in my life, staying married to my wife and having my kids know me and respect me are my two top priorities in life.
Yeah.
And at that time, my wife and I were living in London, and we had our first child, and it became very clear to me that my wife wanted us to move back to the United States.
Okay.
In doing that, I was talking to a long-term client of mine, a client that I'd helped him sell his company back when I was working in the United States, and he said he's starting a new company and wanted my help to come as a business guy. And that's kind of the thing I was always working for, is would anybody ever trust me on the business side?
Yeah.
And to be fair, did he trust me on the business side? Not initially, to be honest. I thought, oh sure, he'll listen to me, because he always listened to me when I was his lawyer.
Right.
He's still a client and a great friend. But I think in some ways, it was a learning curve for me going into the business side. I'll give you an example. We went to our first meeting, with a counterpart, with somebody we were going to do a deal with. Yeah. And I'm in there trying to cut the deal. You'll relate to this.
Yeah.
Because I get paid by the hour usually. So I'm like, if you call me in, I got to get a deal done.
Yeah.
And so we come out of the meeting, and the CEO looks at me and goes, "What were you doing in there?" And I said, well, I was cutting a deal. He goes, I don't know if I want to do a deal with these people. We just met them. And so I learned that, there's a bit of a game going on here, a bit of a dance, where we got to get to know each other. We got to see if there's synergies here.
Interesting.
And that was very eye-opening to me. The other thing, of course, in the startup business or a growth business is you have to prioritize and you have to calibrate the legal advice. I came from a big ivory tower where, a lot of my clients didn't really want to take a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And I got really good at closing out legal risk. And what I learned very quickly in the startup business was, boy, the opportunity here is not to close out the legal risk. The opportunity is to get the deal. Without this deal, we don't get the next deal and the next deal.
Yeah,
and so you can bet the business every day for a while, and then you got to start calibrating as you're growing, as you're getting into more sophistication, you're raising more money, you have to start taking a little less risk. But, so how do you calibrate your advice to the situation that you're in? That's something that I learned taking that business plunge.
Yeah.
And, it informs everything I do every day, from, running the office of the law firm to helping my clients with, growth.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, did you find that you liked taking that business role, or you ultimately decided that you really just like being the lawyer? Or tell me a little bit about
I like the business side. Yeah.
You like the business side.
I liked it. One of the things I found, other than the experiences of taking those companies public in the emerging markets, one of the things I found about my experience at Baker, and this is and I have no complaints about Baker or anything in my experiences there, but one of the things I found is I was kind of a middle manager, helping middle managers do middle management things. And when I say that, I mean, like, let's say an M&A deal for a big, like telecom client or something like that. I'm working with people who are, in the middle of their careers in the legal department, and I'm, working in the middle of a larger organization. And in a lot of ways, I wasn't where the decisions were being made. One of the things I liked about the business side was I was always in the room when decisions were being made. And I wasn't always listened to, but sometimes I was. But, it didn't matter. I was learning and growing. Growing fast. You'll find that, part of my career is, I have a real belief in the growth mindset idea. And so a lot of my career is about taking risks so I can grow. And, that I was growing a lot in that experience.
Well, you ultimately left that and ended up actually being an entrepreneur, right? You basically opened your own.
Yeah, well, that's it. So I, like my wife, we had 2 kids at that time, so we had a second, we came back, we added a second kid. And my wife's like, hey, this is real fun, but you need to get a job, that pays. And I said, okay. And to her credit, she's wonderful. She was working at the time, and she said, look, we're going to have more kids, and I want to have the opportunity to stay home with the kids. And so you have 5 years to figure it out. So I said, okay, I gotta get more serious. So, so I said, how do you meld these two things? How do you meld the fact that I'm a great lawyer with the fact that I love the business side?
Yeah, right.
And at that time, the obvious choice was to start a law firm.
Yeah, right.
And you worked with Craig Johnson, so I thought I was going to be the next Craig Johnson. I was going to innovate on how we, approach the market. I found this amazing business partner, Rich McDerby, who you may know, wonderful lawyer, amazing human. And together we kind of conceived of this idea of, let's take our big firm backgrounds and bring that to the middle market and focus on customer service. One of the things we noticed is as firms were getting larger and larger, they were servicing sort of the Russell 3000 clients, but they were letting all this mid-market go. And they weren't servicing the clients very well. And so we thought, if we could provide a firm that was focused on customer service with the sophistication of our backgrounds, we could really take a big chunk of the market. And, ultimately, I think we were very successful, maybe too successful, because over time I got a little bit more interested in growing the practice than I did in the running of the business. So when I came to Mintz, the opportunity was really, to be quite fair, to go back to being an individual contributor and build my own practice. And so in my first 3 years here, I spent, solely just building my practice. And I'm very grateful. I think, with the help of others around here and the help of a bigger platform, I've been able to triple my book of business from where I was in my own firm. And I'm very grateful. That was my plan here. And having done that plan, it gave me some time to focus a little bit now on, taking our San Francisco office and growing it. So I'm back. They pulled me back in. They sucked me back into the management.
Well, were you looking to try to rejoin a law firm, or did the opportunity kind of present itself, or where you felt like you had kind of outgrown your own firm? Because it seems like having your own firm is kind of like the pinnacle.
People use it. To be quite fair,
You get to
being
make
surrounded
you get
by
to call all the shots and everything when you're running your own firm.
yeah, no, and there's some Pyrrhic victories in there, as well as some actual victories. Um, I think it took me a while to realize that starting a firm served its purpose, and that running a firm was no longer serving a purpose for me. Again, I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs, so for me, kind of like leaving my own firm to go back to a bigger firm seems like the opposite of what my family choices would be. My people around me would do. And it took me a while to get to be comfortable with that. Ultimately, my clients were getting bigger and needing more, and I was needing more, and I wanted to grow. And it's challenging. I love the boutique idea. I think what I'm building here is like a boutique in a bigger law firm. I think in a lot of ways I love the idea of the boutique. It's just really, really hard to grow fast. And if you're good at the business development side or good at the business side or good, I think in many ways like the genius kind of outside general counsel, I was having more and more opportunities that I needed more and more help for. And so it was obvious at that time, taking a step back and saying, hey, look, I'm giving up something, but I'm getting something in return. And I wanted to try it, Richard, I wanted to see if I could do it. Could I grow my practice? Was it possible? Was I as good as I thought I was, or was I as good as some of my clients tell me I am, or whatever? And so that was I'm grateful for that experience. I'm glad I did it.
I mean, it sounds fantastic. Sounds like you're really enjoying it. Would you ever consider at some point in the future ever going back in-house or trying another pure business role? Is that ever on your radar, or is that ship has sailed?
I could see what I'm doing right now for the rest of my life.
Okay.
It's not something I would have told you when I was at Baker McKenzie. Despite being around some of the smartest people and greatest people I've ever worked for and with, I wouldn't have said I could do this forever. I was kind of looking over my shoulder and saying, what else is out there? I could do this for the rest of my life. Part of my life is about taking challenges, taking opportunities and growing and having challenges. And so, I came to Mintz in part because Mintz was the smartest people in the room, but they would never tell you they are. And that really appealed to me. Every conversation I had with somebody was about like how we could work together, and the ideas that were being generated in those conversations were some of the best ideas I've worked on or thought about. And so I love that. And I love that, I coach baseball. I'm very involved in my family. I love that that's also part of our culture here, is being a whole person. So I love those things. Mintz had 400 clients in the Bay Area, when I got here. So, we're doing a lot more in the Bay Area than people think we're doing or people know we're doing. We have 100 lawyers working in this market, despite the fact that we're still trying to grow an office here. So I think in a lot of ways, I was attracted to Mintz because it was here. I was attracted because it was in life sciences and tech. These were places where my practice was really expanding. So, the opportunity in San Francisco for our firm is huge. The things that we do well, the things that we're focused on growing throughout the country, life sciences, technology, clean tech, private equity, those all overlay perfectly with this market. So part of what I noticed as, we have this great scion of the San Francisco legal industry, like Paul Churchill, who I was excited to come join. But as Paul wanted to retire and the opportunity opened up for me to come into the managing partner role, I saw it as not just coming into the managing partner role and not just caretaking an office, but I saw it as an opportunity to grow. And I worked with people here to build a strategic plan, and we're executing on that plan, which I'm spending quite a lot of time on. So again, back to you being patient for me to come on the show, so to speak. So anyways.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, a question that's sort of near to my heart is recruiting also one of your roles. Is that something you're actively doing as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the thing about law firms is we've moved over the last 15 years, and I think this is positive to practice group management or industry management of law firms and not office management of law firms. If you think about it, the two firms I came from were very office centric. Brobeck, San Francisco, Palo Alto, they would compete against each other. We'd show up on pitches, and somebody from Palo Alto would be there. Brobeck's pitching against itself. That was a very office-centric culture. Baker, even more so, because of the way the comp structure worked and the way the firm was built out, it was very insular. I think one of the benefits of doing that is we have a one firm feel, but you lose kind of a little bit of that local, focus. And so what do I mean by that? So I mean, the local office manager has to be focused on building a local recruiting strategy, has to be focused on building a local client development strategy, and it has to be focused on a local culture strategy. And all those things have to work within what the rest of the firm's doing, right? So you have to work with the practice groups to do that. And it's a bit tricky, to be quite honest, as we're iterating on law firm management, I find it to be a little bit tricky to figure out how to make sure you're working with each of the different practice groups in building those strategies. But that's the role here. That's the kind of value. So I spend a lot of my time on recruiting.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time. Congratulations on all your success. And I really appreciate you telling me your whole story.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Very kind of you to have me on again. And I obviously your career is second to none in terms of the experiences you've had. Wide range of experiences similar to mine. But far more success, and I'm hoping just to follow right behind you and be part of that legal community success in the area. So
I appreciate that, Steve. This is Richard Hsu and Steve Osborn. Thanks.